250,000 people who can be pushed into poverty. I guess, on a human level, not just a political level, that must be a difficult thing, a difficult consequence.
Well, starting with that human level, my own family has been impacted by disability all my life. My late mother was extremely ill all her life, and my late brother, who lived in Yorkshire, was very ill and disabled, particularly when he got cancer, which he died of. So I do understand that human level. But we're addressing something which is a system which isn't working. We've got 1 million young people, 1 in 8, who are neither learning nor earning, who are going effectively from school onto some sort of benefit. Now, some of them will need that support. I don't deny that for a moment. But it can't be right that this growing number of young people, when all the evidence shows that if you're going essentially from school to some sort of benefit, then you're not likely to have the chance to get a job that's going to be secure and well paid for the rest of your life. That cannot be right.
The UK political landscape is in the midst of a real storm. Events that previously seemed unlikely are now shaking the very foundations of British politics. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, shocked the country with his surprise announcement of an early election in 2025. At first glance, such a decision might seem like a show of strength and confidence. After all, holding an election is always an important step, an opportunity to fundamentally change the country's political course and regain the trust of voters. However, as the details of what is happening become more and more apparent, it is clear that this move is not a show of confidence, but rather a desperate attempt to save itself. The Labour Party, once a symbol of reform and progress, now looks like a shadow of itself. Under Starmer's leadership, the party has begun to rapidly lose support, not only among citizens, but also among its own MPs. The party is mired in scandals and internal conflicts, and its leaders' ratings have fallen to historic lows. It seems that Keir Starmer is no longer able to control the situation, and his decision to hold elections is not a response to the challenges facing the country, but only a desperate move to save his own political career. It all started with the financial scandal that rocked the country. It is known that £22 billion was taken out of the public purse, which was supposed to be spent on infrastructure projects, improving public services and supporting economic recovery. However, investigations have revealed that the sum was used for dubious deals and political projects that had no benefit to ordinary citizens. The money disappeared, and at this point no one can explain exactly where it went. This was the first red flag that questioned the competence and integrity of the Starmer government. It soon became clear that this scandal was not an isolated incident. Suspicions that there were many hidden corrupt deals in the government began to gain momentum. Several major political figures in Starmer's inner circle were implicated in this financial mess. Investigation reports began to reveal new details, indicating the use of budgetary funds for the personal gain of politicians and their allies. Hidden agreements involving big businessmen, political donors, and foreign investors were discussed behind the scenes in the government. This is not just an accounting error, it is a system in which corrupt deals have become the norm. By this point, public discontent was at an all-time high. People who had previously believed in Starmer's promises of restoring justice and eradicating corruption now felt cheated. Expectations were high for his rule, but now a very different picture has opened up before them. Protests in the streets, demands for his immediate resignation, social media full of criticism. All this has resulted from a loss of confidence in the country's leader. People no longer believe his excuses. Everything that concerned promises to improve life and fix the state machine turned out to be just empty words hiding behind financial crimes and inaction.
This is a long-standing project and something I committed to before the election, and therefore it's delivering on that promise, and it's consistent with what we did in the spring statement just the other day, which is in a period where the world seems more uncertain and more unstable. It's really important we have economic stability in this country. This is really important. It's a big boost, £415 million on top of the other investment, which will mean better trains, Transpennine in particular, for the region. This is a huge region, many millions of people, huge ambition, brilliant businesses, and the transport system needs to match the ambition of the communities, and that's what we're doing today.
I want to talk to you about the spring statement. We haven't had a chance to talk to you since then, since the impact assessment.
However, it is not only the public that is outraged. Within the Labour Party, a real split is beginning to emerge. Whereas just a few months ago, political figures in high places were willing to support Starmer, now everything has changed. With each passing day, more and more MPs are beginning to openly express their discontent with his leadership. Some are resigning, others are beginning to publicly state their doubts about his ability to handle the crisis. Internal party meetings turn into battlefields, where they discuss whether Starmer should stay in office until the elections, or whether he should leave immediately to preserve at least some of the party's reputation. With each passing day, tensions within the party are rising and its very existence is being threatened. Many realize that Starmer's continued leadership will lead to a historic election defeat, and the possible collapse of the Labour Party in his face will be even more devastating than the scandals themselves. There are discussions behind closed doors about possibly removing Starmer before the election. It is believed that if the party does not get rid of him now, it risks losing not only power but also the trust of voters for many years to come. However, such a situation requires harmonization of all interests within the party, and the divisions among its representatives are only getting deeper. Against this background, Starmer's old supporters are beginning to voice their disappointment with increasing frequency. These are the same people who used to support him, believing that he could change the country, make it better. Now they feel that their ideals have been used to hide the government's true goals. The mass resignations in the party are not only a response to an internal split, but also a signal to the whole of Britain. The Labour Party is on the verge of collapse. The political disaster, caused not only by financial scandals, but also by a lack of political will to fix the situation, makes Starmer a political target for anyone willing to pounce on a fallen leader. No matter how Starmer tries to justify himself, the environment around him only worsens. Every statement he makes becomes the occasion for a new wave of discontent. When he announced his decision to hold elections in 2025, it was seen not as a show of confidence, but as a desperate attempt to divert attention from his own political failure. A host of Starmer's supporters, both inside and outside the party, now believe that such a move is not a challenge to political opponents, but an attempt to avoid accountability and at least temporarily stay in power, even if the cost of doing so would be disastrous for his party. And yet he has another chance. But is the fate of his leader unclear if his own party is already bursting with discontent and the public rejects his unconditional support? The Peace 22 billion scandal has erupted in the heart of Britain's political system, like a violent storm, threatening to sweep away the Labour Party and everything Keir Starmer once stood for. What started as whispers of financial mismanagement within the Labour government has now exploded into a full-blown crisis that is impossible to ignore. It is a scandal of such magnitude that it could change the course of British politics forever, and it has the potential to end Keir Starmer's leadership and possibly his political career in the most spectacular way possible. At the center of this scandal is the missing Peace 22 billion money that was supposedly allocated for crucial infrastructure projects, public services, and economic recovery plans. But as investigations unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that this money has not gone where it was intended. Instead, reports suggest that large sums have been funneled into questionable contracts, political pet projects, and even foreign investments that benefit no one but a small group of corporate elites, political donors, and shadowy figures with hidden interests in the future of the Labour Party. The money is gone, unaccounted for, and no one, least of all Keir Starmer, seems to have any clear answers about where it went. What's even more damning is the growing suspicion that Starmer's closest allies and key figures in his inner circle were directly involved in orchestrating these financial dealings. It's not just an oversight or a mistake, this is a full-scale financial catastrophe. There are whispers of secret deals, of politicians using taxpayer money to line their pockets, and of financial transactions being manipulated to cover up corruption. Investigative journalists are digging deeper into the scandal, and with every new revelation, the evidence of management and corruption becomes harder to deny. As the scandal unravels, it's becoming increasingly clear that Starmer's government was not just careless with public funds, it may have actively facilitated the misallocation of taxpayer money. The question on everyone's lips is simple: where did the Peace 22 billion go? And why is Starmer refusing to provide clear answers? For weeks, his government has been stonewalling calls for transparency, refusing to release full records of financial transactions and dismissing growing concerns as nothing more than political attack. But as more evidence comes to light, the truth is becoming undeniable. This scandal goes far deeper than anyone could have imagined. The media has seized on this story with an intensity that has only intensified the public's outrage. The public was already growing increasingly disillusioned with Starmer's leadership, but the scandal has pushed them to the brink. Protesters are flooding the streets, demanding accountability, while social media is ablaze with calls for Starmer's immediate resignation. Labour's supporters, once loyal to the leader they believed would bring integrity back to politics, now feel betrayed. They are questioning whether the man who promised to root out corruption is, in fact, at the very heart of one of the biggest financial scandals in modern British history. But it's not just the public that is turning against Starmer. Labour MPs who once stood firmly behind him are now beginning to jump ship. Some have resigned in protest, unwilling to be associated with what they see as a political disaster that threatens to destroy the party's future. Others are distancing themselves, issuing vague statements about concerns over financial mismanagement, but avoiding directly condemning their leader. There are even rumors of an internal coup as senior party figures discuss the possibility of forcing Starmer out before the election to prevent further damage. In private meetings, MPs are debating whether it's possible to salvage the party's credibility without completely severing ties with their embattled leader. The growing internal dissent has placed Starmer in an incredibly precarious position. With the Peace 22 billion scandal hanging over his head, it's no longer just a question of political survival, it's a question of how much longer he can keep the Labour Party from completely falling apart. If the scandal isn't enough to destroy his leadership, the internal rebellion and the growing public backlash may be the final blows. Starmer is no longer leading his party, he's scrambling to keep it together, hoping that an election can somehow turn the tide in his favour before it's too late. But as each day passes, it becomes more apparent that the Labour Party is teetering on the edge of collapse, and it may not survive the chaos. Inside the Labour Party, the situation has become a full-scale rebellion. What was once a united political force is now fractured beyond recognition. Labour MPs are resigning in droves, and those who remain are locked in fierce debates about Starmer's leadership. Some MPs are still loyal to him, but they are increasingly in the minority. The growing discontent within the party is being fueled by the ever-expanding scandal, with some Labour figures arguing that Starmer's leadership has become untenable and that he must step down before the election. The rebellion is not limited to MPs. Long-time Labour supporters, grassroots activists, and party donors are also turning against Starmer. Many who once saw him as a leader who would bring integrity back to British politics now feel betrayed. They are questioning whether Starmer's promises of transparency and honesty were nothing more than empty rhetoric designed to cover up the party's financial mismanagement. Constituency Labour parties across the country are reporting mass unrest, with some members quitting the party altogether and others calling for emergency votes of no confidence in their local MPs if they continue to back Starmer. The trust that once existed between the leader and his supporters has been shattered, and it may never be repaired. Behind the scenes, senior Labour figures are beginning to discuss the possibility of removing Starmer before the election. Some party veterans are even considering a dramatic vote of no confidence against him, a move that would force him out of office immediately and allow the party to replace him with a new leader who can salvage what is left of Labour's credibility. But time is running out, and the longer Starmer clings to power, the more damage he does to the party. His refusal to step down is causing irreparable harm to Labour's image, and some MPs are beginning to openly question whether it is too late for the party to recover. The internal divisions within Labour are now so deep that it's unclear whether the party can survive this crisis, let alone win the upcoming election. The public's anger is only escalating. Protests are erupting in major cities, with furious citizens demanding Starmer's resignation. Social media is flooded with hashtags like Starmer must go and Labour corruption, and for the first time since taking power, Starmer is facing a crisis that he may not be able to talk his way out of. The polls show a sharp decline in support for Labour, with many voters now viewing the party as nothing more than a corrupt institution led by a man who has failed them. The Conservative Party, despite its own internal problems, is beginning to capitalise on Labour's failures, and Starmer's leadership is under attack from all sides. With each passing day, it becomes clearer that the Labour Party is headed for disaster. The Peace 22 billion scandal has exposed the deep rot within the party, and the internal rebellion is threatening to tear it apart. The question now is whether Starmer can survive this unprecedented crisis, or whether his downfall will mark the end of his political career and the collapse of the Labour Party as a viable force in British politics. The stakes couldn't be higher, and as the general election looms, it remains to be seen whether Starmer can regain control of the situation, or whether this is the beginning of the end for his leadership.